Let's begin. Number 10. The invisible tax you pay every day. You ever feel like you're running on a treadmill, but the speed keeps increasing without you touching the controls? You're working harder, maybe even getting raises, but the finish line, financial security, seems to get further away. That's not a feeling, it's a feature. Welcome to inflation, the government's favorite magic trick. It's the art of making your money worth less, so slowly you barely notice it until you're paying $7 for a box of cereal that used to cost $3. After the 2008 financial crisis, and again during the pandemic, central banks fired up the money printers like they were trying to win a global confetti competition. This policy, known as quantitative easing, floods the economy with new cash. Sounds great, right? More money for everyone. Except it's a trap. When the supply of money goes up, the value of each individual dollar goes down. Your $10 can't buy what it used to. Your savings account is now a leaky bucket, losing purchasing power every single day. The government gets to pay back its colossal debts with these cheaper, devalued dollars, effectively getting a discount on its own irresponsibility. Meanwhile, the rich, who own assets like stocks, real estate, and fine art, watch their net worth explode because those things get more expensive. But your paycheck, your savings, they're being silently pickpocketed. The financial lesson here is brutal. Cash is not king, it's a melting ice cube. The government doesn't need to raise your taxes directly if it can just devalue the money you've already earned. They create money out of thin air, spend it first when it's most valuable, and by the time it trickles down to you, it's lost its power. It's the most effective, widespread, and least understood tax of them all. Turns out, the most expensive thing you can own is a pile of money that isn't growing. Number 9, guilty until proven innocent, but for your cash. Imagine you're driving down the highway. You just sold a car, and you've got $10,000 cash in your glove compartment to buy a new one. You get pulled over for a broken taillight. The officer sees the cash, gets suspicious, and seizes it. Not you, just the cash. You're not arrested, not charged with a crime. But your money is gone. To get it back, you have to go to court and prove that your legally earned money is innocent. This isn't a dystopian movie plot. This is civil asset forfeiture, a government program that feels like it was designed by a pickpocket with a law degree. It became incredibly popular in the United States during the war on drugs in the 1980s, and it's been a cash cow for law enforcement ever since. Here's the twisted logic. Your property can be suspected of being involved in a crime, even if you're not. The legal case isn't the people versus you, it's the United States versus $10,000. And the standard of proof for the government to keep your stuff is ridiculously low. In some places, they just need a preponderance of the evidence, which is basically a fancy way of saying it's more likely than not that the money is dirty. While you, the actual owner, have to hire a lawyer and fight a legal battle that can cost more than the money they took. Many people just give up. The lesson? The system can be designed to make fighting for your own property a losing financial proposition. Law enforcement agencies often get to keep a large portion of what they seize, creating a perverse profit incentive to take first and ask questions later. It's a direct wealth transfer from citizens to the state, bypassing the whole due process thing that people thought was important. Suddenly, carrying a large amount of cash doesn't just make you a target for criminals, it makes you a target for the people who are supposed to protect you from them. Number 8, the state-sponsored tax on hope. What if the government ran a business with a product that has almost zero chance of working, marketed it exclusively to the people who can least afford it, and then used the profits to plug holes in its own budget? That's not a hypothetical, it's the state lottery. It's a financial sleight of hand so brilliant, it's almost impressive. They sell you a 1 in 300 million chance to escape poverty, frame it as a fun civic duty that funds education, and then rake in billions off the statistical illiteracy of the population. It's often called a stupidity tax, but that's not quite right. It's a tax on desperation. Since the first modern U.S. state lottery was established in New Hampshire back in 1964, the system has perfected the art of preying on hope. The ads never show the millions of people who lost. They show the one guy holding a giant check, grinning like he just solved a problem that money can in fact solve. But the math is horrifying. Your odds of winning the Powerball are worse than being killed by a falling coconut or giving birth to identical quadruplets. You are literally more likely to be a movie star than to win. Yet, Americans spend over $100 billion a year on lottery tickets. The financial lesson is a dark one. Governments are perfectly willing to weaponize behavioral psychology against their own citizens for profit. They know that people in tough financial spots are more likely to buy into a long-shot dream. And that line about funding education, it's often a shell game. When lottery money comes in, states often reduce funding from the general budget, so the net gain for schools is minimal or non-existent. It's a regressive tax system where the poorest citizens voluntarily fund a system that offers them virtually no return, all while thinking they're one lucky ticket away from freedom. Number 7, the unforgivable debt chain. You were told a simple story. Go to college, get a good job, live a better life. The government even offered to help, generously backing student loans to make that dream accessible. But in reality, they weren't just opening a door, they were setting a trap. For decades, starting particularly in the late 20th century, the federal government essentially co-signed on an ever-increasing mountain of student debt. Lenders, realizing the government would cover the losses if a student defaulted, had zero incentive to care if a 19-year-old was borrowing $150,000 for a degree in medieval poetry. They couldn't lose. As a result, universities, seeing a flood of guaranteed money, jacked up tuition prices at a rate that makes inflation look tame. But here's the most sinister part of the trick. In 2005, a bankruptcy reform bill made it nearly impossible to discharge federal or private student loans. You can bankrupt yourself out of credit card debt, medical bills, even gambling losses. But that student loan, it will follow you to the grave. They can garnish your wages. They can take your tax refund. They can even take a portion of your Social Security check when you're old and gray. The government created a special class of debt from which there is no escape. The financial lesson is a masterclass in public-private partnership hell. The government guaranteed the risk, the schools grabbed the cash, and the banks collected the interest. The only person left holding the bag was you. You were sold an investment in your future that, for millions, became a life sentence in a financial prison. They didn't just give you a loan, they gave you a permanent ball and chain, ensuring a significant chunk of your future earnings would always belong to them. Here's how the scam works. For decades, Social Security took in more money from workers than it paid out to retirees. What happened to that surplus? Did they invest it in a high-yield fund? No. The government borrowed it to pay for other things: wars, infrastructure, tax cuts, you name it. In exchange, the Treasury Department issued special, non-tradable bonds to the Social Security Administration. So the trust fund isn't filled with cash. It's filled with promises from the government to pay itself back, using money it will collect from your children and grandchildren in the future. This is like taking all the money out of your kid's college fund, spending it on a new car, and leaving a sticky note in the empty drawer that says, "I owe you $100,000. Love, Dad." The financial lesson is that government accounting operates in a fantasy land where borrowing from yourself to pay for current expenses is considered a sound long-term strategy. They spent your retirement money years ago and are now counting on future taxpayers to make good on their promises. It's a demographic and fiscal time bomb, and it was set by the very people who promised to keep your future secure. Number 4, the legal land grab. You think you own your home? That's cute. You're really just a long-term tenant, and the government is your landlord with the power to evict you at any time for a better tenant. This isn't just about failing to pay property taxes. This is about eminent domain, the government's power to forcibly buy your property for public use. Historically, that meant things everyone could agree on, like a new highway, a school, or a public park. But over the last half-century, the definition of public use has been twisted into something unrecognizable. Now it can mean a new corporate headquarters, a luxury condo complex, or a shopping mall. The whole perversion was put on full display in the infamous 2005 Supreme Court case Kelo v. City of New London. The city didn't want to build a hospital. They wanted to bulldoze an entire middle-class neighborhood, including one woman's little pink house, to make way for a private development that would support a new Pfizer research facility. The argument? The new development would generate more tax revenue, and that increased tax revenue was a public benefit. The court agreed. The government can take your home from you and give it to a wealthier, more powerful private developer, all under the guise of economic development. The financial lesson is that your property rights are only as strong as the profit motives of those with more political power. The government isn't just a neutral referee. It's an active player in the real estate market, and it's often playing for the team that can promise a bigger tax base. They'll pay you fair market value, but that never accounts for the cost of uprooting your life, your community, and the memories built within four walls. It's a perfectly legal way to seize wealth from the individual and hand it over to the well-connected. Number 3, the permission slips for an economy. Want to earn a living? Get in line and be prepared to pay. In a supposedly free market, governments at all levels have created a jungle of occupational licensing laws. You want to be a florist, a tour guide, a hair braider, or an interior designer? You might need to spend thousands of dollars and hundreds, if not thousands of hours in state-mandated training for a license. These rules are sold to the public under the banner of safety and quality control, and for some professions like doctors or pilots, that makes sense. But for a huge number of jobs, it's nothing more than protectionism, a racket designed to keep new competition out. This is a modern form of the medieval guild system. The people already in the industry, the established plumbers, electricians, or cosmetologists, lobby the government to create absurdly high barriers to entry. This keeps supply low and prices high. It strangles entrepreneurship, especially for lower-income individuals who can't afford the time or money to jump through arbitrary hoops. It's a system where the government picks winners and losers, and the winner is almost always the guy who's already in business. Meanwhile, you're paying more for everything from a haircut to a leaky faucet because competition has been legally squashed. The lesson here is about regulatory capture. The very industries the government is supposed to be regulating are the ones writing the rule book. It's a hidden tax on both aspiring workers and consumers. By creating a maze of permits, fees, and licenses, the government stifles economic mobility and makes it harder for you to build your own wealth from the ground up. They're not protecting you from a bad haircut. They're protecting the established barbershop from a competitor who might charge $1 less. Number 2, socialism for the rich, capitalism for you. Here's the fundamental rule of the modern economy. When you make a bad financial decision, you go broke. When a multi-trillion-dollar bank makes a bad financial decision so catastrophic it threatens to burn down the entire global economy, you pay for it. This is the doctrine of too big to fail, and it's the most blatant example of a rigged system. The 2008 financial crisis was the ultimate demonstration. Banks and financial institutions spent years gambling with toxic mortgage-backed securities, fully aware of the risks. When the house of cards inevitably collapsed, they didn't face the consequences. They got a bailout. The government, using your taxpayer money, shoveled trillions of dollars into these insolvent institutions to prevent a total collapse. The same politicians who preach about personal responsibility and the virtues of the free market suddenly became full-blown socialists when their friends on Wall Street were in trouble. The profits had been privatized and handed out in multi-million-dollar bonuses for years. But the losses were socialized and dumped squarely on the public's shoulders. Millions of people lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings, while the architects of the disaster were deemed essential and given a blank check. The financial lesson is terrifyingly simple. There are two sets of rules. There's the unforgiving, brutal reality of capitalism for you and your small business, where one mistake can be fatal. And then there's the cozy, government-backed safety net for the financial elite, where no amount of greed or incompetence is too great to be rewarded with a rescue package. They took your money to fix a problem they created, and in the process, they solidified a system where the biggest players know they can bet the farm, because if they lose, the government will just force you to buy them a new one. Basically, the government is your most expensive subscription service, and you can't cancel. Subscribe so you at least know what you're paying for.